Welcome to episode 7, Conversations with Counselors, with the one and only Jordan Pickell.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us today on Conversations with Counselors.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love just a quick introduction of yourself and just how long you've been a counselor for and what do you specialize in?
I'm Jordan Pickell, and I'm a registered clinical counselor and trauma therapist, and I've been a counselor since 2014. I came up through the anti-violence sector working with survivors of sexualized violence and abuse, and now being in private practice, I work with lots of folks who experience trauma of lots of different types that are both kind of the explicit events and then also, you know, living in the culture that we live in and childhood experiences of being unseen or of kind of emotional neglect, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Would you say the stigma in your experience, what you've seen has gotten a little bit less of like, it's more and more people are finding it okay to go see a counselor?
Oh, yes, I think so, yeah. Lots of folks going to counseling for the first time, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it's come from a place, usually when people get to counseling, something has happened, even if it's not that crisis point. It's that I've been meaning to go and people have told me to go. I've been kind of relying on my friends and I need some extra support and now I'm here.
Yeah.
And it, just having that first session, I think, just completely breaks it open.
Yeah.
That, I can talk to someone, they're a real human being.
Yeah.
And it's a lot smoother than people expect it to be, a lot less awkward, and that most often, people walk away from that first session feeling like a weight has lifted off their shoulders. Yeah.
Just briefly, my dad went and saw a counselor for the first time, like a couple of years back, and it was he came back, like really had to convince him, like, Dad, I think this is a good thing. And it took him a while, and he came back, and he wouldn't even fully acknowledge, but he brought my Stepmom Flowers, and he had this little pep in his step. It was actually very cute. It was like, it was just like he was lighter, and he's like, that was all right.
Yeah.
That was, that wasn't so bad.
That's right.
Yeah. That's great. How do we know when we need to be setting boundaries, and two, why can it be so difficult for people? Like the holiday season is a very challenging time for many, and I even know for myself, I have trouble putting up certain boundaries with family members. And so how do we know when we need to have those conversations?
Part of it is what I said earlier about attuning to your own emotions, that emotional awareness of, I'm feeling depleted, I'm feeling resentful, or I'm feeling even angry, irritated, just drained. That can be a sign that it's time to set boundaries, that especially going into the holidays, it's kind of the season for being cozy and being inside, and yet I think for a lot of us, we have more engagements than ever during the last part of the year. So how are we going to spend our precious time, money, energy, and who are we going to prioritize? So that means saying no to some things.
Easier said than done, though, in that way. Like, I think for all of us, sometimes where there's boundaries need to be drawn, it's like we've been maybe walked over for quite some time, and it's like it takes maybe some courage.
Oh, yeah.
Or to actually draw that boundary. Yeah,
some courage. I mean, it's uncomfortable, right? Yeah, so some of it is just knowing that it's going to be uncomfortable, going into the interaction thinking it's going to be a difficult, vulnerable conversation, and I'm worth I get to have my own time. I get to say no to some things that people will survive. They'll be okay, even if they're disappointed. Yeah. And it's okay if they're disappointed.
For somebody watching this right now who maybe even having a tough time getting out of bed this morning, is there one piece of advice or thought or tip or anything that you could give to that person that could help or support?
Yeah, one tip. Okay. Well, let me think. I would say to be just so self-compassionate that it makes sense. You know, we kind of live in a time that's very difficult, in a culture that's kind of hustle culture, and there's a lot of that pressure to be positive all the time, that kind of toxic positivity. So we need rest. It's okay to rest. Now, if you're not able to get out of bed because you're depressed, then yes, self-compassion. Then also just I would take shortcuts, like have your groceries delivered, use paper plates. If it's difficult to take a shower standing up, do it sitting down. Bring a chair. You know, take a bath instead. All the things that that will make it more simple for you, and it's okay. Yeah.
Curious. I was on your website, and I was looking at some of the different articles you wrote, and you wrote an article called "Have I Experienced Trauma?" And I found it a very fascinating article because I think a lot of us don't really know, you know, or like we don't really know what trauma necessarily is. And there's maybe a lot of us that have experienced trauma and haven't really looked at it in a way. And so I'd just be curious to maybe share a bit about that article and that question, you know, that exact question, have I experienced trauma? So how do people know, like how do people know if they've experienced it, or what's an idea, that a way that people could be more knowledgeable in that area?
Yeah. Okay. You asked me about an article that I wrote so long ago. Let me think. I mean, okay.
It was a great article.
Trauma is really at the most basic level. Anything that overwhelms your nervous system. And that could be, for some of us, something as big as a car crash, or as small as, well, it's not small. I shouldn't call it small, but you know, being broken up with, being unseen, unheard, unloved growing up, or being in a place that's kind of chaotic, whether it's, you know, at home when you were young, or even in a political atmosphere where there's that sense of chaos. And I would say that the pandemic has been pretty traumatizing at a collective level, and certainly at an individual level as well. So in your nervous system, when do you feel a sense of overwhelm? Like, are you in, can you be flipped into a state of kind of fight or flight or freeze? And that will give you an idea that something, you know, if you feel like you need to run, if you feel like you want to hide, if you feel like that shut down, even if it's, you know, we kind of make jokes of like, oh, it's traumatic. Like, people are saying that it's almost an exaggerated thing, that it's special to, or it makes people feel special to say that something's traumatic. And there is a little bit of that, of calling things traumatic that isn't. But for the most part, if a walk down the street could be traumatic for someone who's experienced a car accident, right? And you have a car kind of swerves at you, and even if you're completely fine, there can be this overwhelm in your nervous system. So, and you know, as a therapist, it's a lot of the work I do is saying, like, yes, that was traumatic, but also the label isn't ultimately what's important. That you can go to counseling. People are worthwhile. Whenever I have a client come and say, like, am I worthy to be here? Shouldn't someone else be here because they have it harder than I do? I say that you deserve to take up space, and what you've been through matters too, and that you belong here.
Yeah, great. Want to know, so this is, again, going back to the start, personality question, because I just kind of jumped, jumped over that a little bit, because we went from, you were already talking about counseling, and so what is one thing or passion that that you have that most people may not know about? Wouldn't know.
I am really into dreams. So for the last about 10 years, when I wake up, especially if I have a particularly emotional dream or something that sticks in my mind, I write it down. And then I've actually created a group of like a few friends. We get together every month and we talk about our dreams and kind of interpret each other's dreams. And
Cool.
I love it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So
That's fascinating. This is why we ask that question, because you never know what you're going to get in your dream group. That's great. And have you discovered some cool things?
Yes, there's something about dreams that gets past kind of the conscious awareness.
Yeah.
My idea is that dreams do have meaning, and they kind of tell us things on the edges of our awareness. Now, a lot of people, I don't necessarily bring it into my therapeutic work that much,
right?
Because some people are into it, some people aren't. But I think it's certainly a part of my own self-development work.
Yeah, cool. I've always been scared to dissect my dreams. So I wake up, I'm like,
yeah. I mean, there's no such thing as a bad dream.
Yeah.
They all come in the service of health and wholeness and healing.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Jordan, just in closing thoughts, we always, in closing the episode, we always kind of turn it over to the counselor to share anything that they feel like that was missed or anything that it's top of mind. So any closing thoughts for you today?
I would just say that you are worthwhile. You and the proverbial you are worthwhile, and of care and support and love, and to be seen and heard and held, and all those good things, all the capital G good things, and that counseling is a huge part of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. And anywhere, so for people who want to look you up and learn more about you, where do they go?
You can go to my website. It's jordanpickellcounseling.ca, or you can find me on Instagram, Jordan Pickell Counseling. And I also am part of a podcast for therapists called Edge of the Couch. So if there are any therapists watching, then they can head there too.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much, Jordan. Episode 7.
That's right.
Conversations with Counselors with Jordan Pickell.
Thank you.
Is in the books.
That's right.